First contact with death. They came without warning. No dramatic announcements, no hovering motherships casting shadows over major cities. The Exarathi simply appeared in Earth's orbit one Tuesday morning, their vessels materializing from quantum space like ghosts becoming solid. Sleek, obsidian ships that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, hanging against the stars like wounds in reality itself. Within hours, every screen on Earth displayed the same message. Not in English or Chinese or any human language, but somehow understood by everyone who saw it. The words burned themselves into consciousness, bypassing language entirely. Submit. Resistance brings extinction. General Marcus Chen stood in the Situation Room beneath the Pentagon, watching footage from observatories worldwide. The alien fleet numbered in the thousands, each ship the size of a city block. Their technology made humanity's most advanced weapons look like stone tools. "Sir, we've lost contact with the ISS," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "All satellites are non-responsive. They've created some kind of dampening field." Chen nodded grimly. "Status on our response teams." Fighter squadrons launched from 12 nations, nuclear submarines moving into position, ground forces mobilizing worldwide. The first engagement lasted exactly 17 minutes. F-35s screamed through the upper atmosphere, launching everything they had at the nearest Exarathi vessel. Missiles detonated harmlessly against shields that rippled like water. Then the aliens responded. Blue light lanced from their ships, and the fighters simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, just empty air where brave pilots had been moments before. On the ground, tank battalions found their weapon systems dead, electronics fried by pulses that left crews screaming as their nervous systems overloaded. By sunset, Earth's military might lay broken. Cities burned where resistance had been strongest. The message came again, this time accompanied by holographic projections of Exarathi warriors, 7 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor that seemed to grow from their flesh, with too many eyes that saw in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. Submit. Final warning. That's when Dr. Sarah Voss made the call that would change everything. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that didn't exist on any map, she activated Project Nightmare. The program had been humanity's darkest secret for 3 decades, born from the paranoid certainty that someday, somewhere, we would face an enemy we couldn't defeat with conventional means. "Are you sure about this?" Colonel Wright asked, watching Voss input the activation codes. "Once we start this process, there's no going back. These volunteers, they won't be human anymore." Voss paused, her fingers hovering over the final key. They stopped being human the moment they volunteered. Now they'll become something else, something the universe has never seen before. The volunteers were already in their pods, 100 men and women chosen from millions who had offered their lives when the project began. Each had passed psychological evaluations that would have broken ordinary minds. Each understood they would never see their families again. Among them was Captain James Mitchell, former Navy SEAL, who had lost his entire team to the alien weapons. As the green fluid filled his pod, as nanomachines rewrote his DNA and quantum processors, merged with his nervous system, his last human thought was simple: make them pay. The transformation took 12 hours. When the pods opened, what emerged barely resembled the humans who had entered. Their bodies had been rebuilt at the molecular level, incorporating technology that blurred the line between organic and artificial. But the real changes were deeper. Project Nightmare hadn't just enhanced human bodies. It had weaponized human consciousness itself. Fear, rage, hatred, emotions that Exarathi had evolved beyond millions of years ago, became tangible forces in the hands of these new warriors. Mitchell was the first to complete the change. His eyes opened, no longer brown but black voids that seemed to drink in light. When he moved, reality stuttered around him, as if existence itself recoiled from what he had become. The other volunteers followed, each unique in their transformation, each a different flavor of nightmare given form. Dr. Voss watched through reinforced observation windows as her creations tested their abilities. One volunteer, formerly a kindergarten teacher named Maria Santos, discovered she could project pure terror directly into other minds. Another found he could phase through solid matter, becoming literally untouchable. Mitchell himself seemed to bend space around him, moving in ways that hurt to watch. "My God," Wright whispered, "what have we done?" "What we had to," Voss replied, though her voice shook. "Send the message." The message went out on all frequencies, in all languages, even in the Exarathi's own quantum communications. It was simple. "You brought hell. We're sending it back." The Exarathi commander, Crix Theta, received the transmission aboard his flagship. He had conquered 47 worlds, exterminated species that had achieved spaceflight, while humanity still cowered in caves. The message amused him. Primitive defiance, he told his second-in-command. Begin the final assault. Leave no survivors. But something was wrong. The quantum sensors that mapped every living thing on Earth's surface began showing anomalies. 100 points of impossible readings, as if patches of space had gone mad. Then the first ship went silent. It was a scout vessel on the edge of the fleet, monitoring the Pacific Ocean. One moment it was transmitting normally. The next, nothing. No distress signal, no explosion, just silence. Then another ship, and another. Crix Theta demanded visual confirmation. The holographic display showed him impossible things. Human-shaped figures moving through the vacuum of space without suits, tearing through hull plating with bare hands. His soldiers, warriors who had never known fear, screaming into their communicators about shadows that killed with a touch, about nightmares that had learned to walk. On Earth, the tide had turned. Mitchell led his team through the streets of a ruined Denver, hunting Exarathi ground forces. The aliens' advanced weapons were useless against enemies who could step between dimensions, who could turn their own terror back against them. For the first time in their species' history, the Exarathi learned what it meant to be prey. Maria Santos found she could do more than project fear. She could manifest it, pulling nightmares from the Exarathi subconscious and giving them form. Ancient predators from their homeworld, long extinct, suddenly stalked them through abandoned shopping malls. Childhood terrors they had forgotten became real, hunting them with intelligence and malice. The transformation of the volunteers continued even after they left their pods. Each kill, each moment of combat, seemed to evolve them further. They were becoming something new, something that fed on conflict and grew stronger from fear. By the third day, Exarathi communications were chaos. Ships reported impossible casualties, soldiers driven mad by visions, entire battalions disappearing without trace. The dampening field that had crippled Earth's technology began to fail as the creatures that had once been human found ways to corrupt it from within. Crix Theta watched his perfect invasion crumble. These humans had done something incomprehensible. They had weaponized the very concepts of fear and nightmare. His soldiers, bred for millennia to be perfect warriors, were breaking down. Some begged to retreat. Others simply shut down, their minds unable to process what they faced. The commander tried to restore order, to implement new tactics. But how do you fight an enemy that exists partially outside reality? How do you defeat nightmares that learn and adapt with each encounter? The real horror, Crix Theta realized, wasn't what the humans had become. It was what they had always been, hidden beneath their fragile bodies and primitive technology. They were a species that had evolved surrounded by predators, that had survived by becoming the worst monster in any room. And now they had the power to make that nature manifest. As his fleet began to retreat, as ships fled Earth's orbit in panic, Crix Theta sent one final message to the Exarathi homeworld. Quarantine this sector. Mark this species as Category Omega threat. Do not approach. Do not communicate. They have become what we feared existed in the dark between stars. The message cut off mid-transmission. On the bridge of his flagship, something stepped out of shadow. Something that had once been human but now was so much more. It smiled with too many teeth, reality bending around it like water. Leaking so soon? Mitchell asked, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't exist. But we're just getting started. When nightmares walk. The Exarathi flagship Dominion's end hung in space, its engines powering up for an emergency quantum jump. Inside, Commander Krixthida worked frantically at the navigation console, his 4 arms moving in perfect coordination. The retreat signal had been sent. Now he just needed to escape with the critical data about humanity's transformation. He never saw Mitchell move. One moment the transformed human stood by the bridge entrance. The next he was beside the commander, one hand resting almost gently on the alien's armored shoulder. "You came to our world uninvited," Mitchell said, his voice carrying undertones that made the ship's AI scream in binary. "Threatened our children. Burned our cities. Did you really think we'd let you leave?" Krixthida tried to activate his personal shield, but the device simply melted, circuits corrupting at Mitchell's touch. Around the bridge, other Exarathi officers backed away, their weapons useless. They had conquered worlds, but they had never faced anything like this. "What are you?" Krixthida asked, managing to keep his voice steady despite the fear hormones flooding his system. Mitchell tilted his head, the motion somehow wrong, as if his neck had too many joints. "We're what you made us. What we always were, perhaps just waiting for the right push. You wanted to meet humanity's true face. Here we are." Across Earth's orbit, the hunt intensified. The 100 volunteers had become something beyond human comprehension, each evolving along different paths of nightmare. Maria Santos drifted through the void, her form shifting between solid and ethereal, surrounding fleeing Exarathi ships with manifestations of their deepest fears. What had started as projected terror had become something far more dangerous. She could now reach into the collective unconscious of entire species and drag their racial nightmares into reality. The Exarathi had evolved on a world of perpetual twilight, where massive predators called the Devouring Dark had hunted them for millions of years before they achieved sapience. Maria pulled these extinct horrors from genetic memory, gave them form and hunger, and set them loose inside the alien ships. Soldiers who had known no fear in centuries found themselves facing the shadows that had shaped their species' evolution. Dr. Chen, another volunteer, had taken a different path. His transformation had focused on the concept of entropy itself. Where he walked, reality began to unravel. Exarathi technology, based on quantum coherence and precise energy states, simply ceased to function in his presence. Entire ships lost structural integrity, their advanced alloys reverting to component elements. The Exarathi tried to adapt. They had conquered galaxies after all. Their military doctrine had provisions for exotic threats. But every tactic failed against enemies that seemed to rewrite the rules of reality with each encounter. Squad leader Vextor led a team of Exarathi elite commandos through the corridors of their besieged cruiser. Something was hunting them. Something that had once been a human librarian named Thomas Park. His transformation had given him the ability to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Quantum uncertainty made flesh. "Thermal signatures are useless," Vextor reported. "Motion sensors show movement everywhere and nowhere. Request immediate extraction." The response never came. The lights went out, and in the darkness, Vextor heard his soldiers screaming. Not death screams. Worse, screams of soldiers experiencing fear for the first time in their lives, their conditioning shattered by something that attacked not just their bodies but the very concept of their existence. When the lights returned, Vextor was alone. His squad was gone, but their weapons remained, arranged in a perfect circle around him. In the center of the circle, written in a script that hurt to read, "You taught us to embrace the dark. Thank you." On Earth, the transformation of humanity had begun to spread beyond the original volunteers. The quantum field they generated, the reality distortion that allowed their impossible abilities, was infectious. Ordinary humans exposed to it began to change, though more slowly and less dramatically than the volunteers. In the ruins of New York, Sarah Williams had been a janitor, cleaning offices when the invasion began. Now she found she could hear the aliens' thoughts, feel their fear as a tangible thing she could shape and mold. Others discovered they could phase through solid matter, or see across dimensions, or project their consciousness into Serathi technology. The controlled transformation of Project Nightmare had become something else, a species-wide evolution triggered by existential threat. Humanity was adapting to become the predator rather than the prey. General Marcus Chen watched the tactical displays in the Pentagon's war room. The alien fleet was in full retreat, but the volunteers weren't letting them go. Each destroyed ship seemed to make the transformed humans stronger, as if they fed on conflict itself. "Sir, we've lost contact with Team 7, an aide reported. Last transmission suggested they had breached the alien command ship." Chen nodded. He had known from the moment Dr. Voss activated Project Nightmare that they were crossing a line humanity could never uncross. They had chosen to become monsters to fight monsters. The only question now was whether they could find their way back. Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Exarathi flagship, reality warping around him like heat shimmer. The alien crew lay unconscious, or worse, their minds overwhelmed by the psychic pressure of his presence. Only Commander Crixthida remained standing, though his legs shook with effort. "You want to know what we are?" Mitchell asked, his form shifting, becoming something that existed in too many dimensions at once. "We're the answer to a question the universe should never have asked. You forced evolution's hand, and this is what emerged." Through the view screen, they watched as more Exarathi ships tried to flee. Some made it to quantum jump distance, space folding around them as they escaped. Others weren't so lucky. The volunteer called Rebecca Marsh had discovered she could corrupt the quantum field itself, turning faster than light travel into a death trap. Ships attempting to jump found themselves scattered across multiple dimensions, their crews existing in all possible states simultaneously. "Please," Crixthida said, the words strange on his lips. His species had no concept of begging. "Let the survivors go. We will never return. We will warn others to avoid your world." Mitchell seemed to consider this. Around him, the other volunteers gathered, phasing through bulkheads and reality alike. Each was unique, each terrible in their own way, but all shared something, a hunger that grew with each victory. "You misunderstand," Maria Santos said, her voice harmonizing with screams from dimensions that touched their own. "We're not defending Earth anymore. We're following you home." The implications hit Crixthida like a physical blow. These creatures, these weaponized nightmares, weren't content with defending their world. They had tasted power, felt the intoxication of being the predator rather than prey, and they wanted more. "You created us," Dr. Chen added, entropy swirling around him like a personal storm. "And now we're your responsibility. Every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved. They're going to meet us. On Earth, the changes accelerated. The quantum field generated by the volunteers was rewriting human DNA, preparing the species for a new phase of existence. Children born after the transformation began showed signs of inherent abilities, as if humanity was rapidly evolving to match its new role in the universe. Dr. Voss watched the data streams in horror and fascination. Project Nightmare had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, or nightmares. They had created weapons capable of defeating a technologically superior enemy. But weapons, once forged, have a tendency to seek new targets. "What have we become?" she whispered to Colonel Wright. "What we needed to be," he replied, though his eyes showed the same fear. "The question is, what do we become next?" The last Exarathi ship to escape carried a warning that would echo across the galaxy. Commander Crixthida's final log, transmitted on all frequencies. "The humans are no longer prey. They are no longer even predators. They have become something new. Living weapons that grow stronger with each conflict. They consume fear and transform it into power. They bend reality to their will. And they are coming. We triggered an evolution we didn't understand. We threatened a species that had spent its entire existence learning to become the monster in the dark, and now that monster has learned to travel between stars. Flee, hide, pray to whatever gods you believe in. But know this, when the humans come, when the nightmares they've become find you, no technology, no weapon, no shield will save you. They are fear itself, given form and hunger. May the universe forgive us for what we've unleashed. As the Earth's transformed defenders prepared their own ships, HFY vessels reshaped by impossible will into something that shouldn't exist, humanity faced its greatest challenge. Not the invasion they had defeated, but the question of what to do with the power they had claimed. Mitchell stood at the helm of the commandeered flagship, star charts spreading before him showing the location of every HFY world, every conquered planet, every slave species crying out for liberation. Behind him, 99 other nightmares made flesh awaited his command. So, Maria asked, reality rippling where she stood, do we go back to being human, or do we finish what they started? Mitchell smiled, and stars visible through the viewscreen seemed to dim in response. We're not human anymore. We're something new, something the universe needs, perhaps. The HFY showed us that there are monsters among the stars. He paused, feeling the hunger that drove them all now, the need to hunt, to grow stronger, to become more than they were. Let's show them what real monsters look like. The transformed fleet turned away from Earth, quantum engines warming up for jumps that would carry them to distant stars. On the planet below, humanity watched their saviors depart and wondered if they had traded one threat for something far worse. But evolution doesn't move backward. The weapons had been forged, the transformation complete. Humanity had looked into the abyss of extinction and chosen to become something the abyss would fear. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 conquered worlds, slave species looked up at unfamiliar stars and felt something they hadn't experienced in generations: hope. And on that HFY homeworld, defense controllers watched their deep space sensors with growing dread as impossible signatures appeared at the edge of their system. The nightmares had learned to walk among the stars, and they were hungry. The war was over. The hunt had just begun.